All right, everybody, welcome back into the Auburn Live Basketball Show. Appreciate you joining us. I'm Justin Hokanson. With me, as always, Mr. Alan Head. What's up? What's up?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Good, man. Ready for another week. Talking some Auburn hoops. 2 months since the last time Auburn basketball lost a game. How's that feel?
Unreal. I mean, I can be honest. In the midst of the Tony Barbie era, when you could buy tickets for $10 and or find them just laying on the ground randomly on Auburn's campus, to think where Bruce has this program now, to me, it's surreal to see this right now.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into all of that good stuff here in just a moment. Quick shout out to our sponsor of the show, Session Cocktail, downtown Auburn. Go check them out right there on Magnolia. 4 to 7 happy hour. Great drinks, great old fashioned. Go check them out on Saturday if you're coming in for the Florida game. Go have some lunch if you're in town. Go have some lunch. I don't know when Saturday. I'm not sure when they open. For sure afterwards. If you're in town, go to the game and then go have a drink or something afterwards. If you're staying in town for the evening, or if you can, if you're going to dinner or something like that, it'd be a great spot to go check them out. Session Cocktail, downtown Auburn. Appreciate them and their support of the show and the site. All right, let's talk about a couple of wins. Auburn 10-point win over Ole Miss, and now a 28-point win over Oklahoma. Auburn went to Oxford, won by 10, 92-82, and then came home and whipped up on Oklahoma pretty good, 98-70. Another 2-0 week. Like we said, 2 months since they last lost a basketball game. I thought the game in Oxford was really impressive. I thought that was going to be one I was a little concerned about. I thought Ole Miss would kind of muck that game up a little bit. And it was Auburn's second road game of the week. And I'm just kind of thinking, is it sort of time for a letdown? And nope. Auburn scores 92. And then they came home and beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma doesn't have a great defense, obviously, some decent players on offense. But that game, after about 7 or 8 minutes, I was like, okay, Auburn's going to win this game just because Oklahoma wasn't going to be able to stop them. And Auburn's defense is good enough that if you're going to give up 80 to Auburn, you're going to lose. I mean, yes. Pretty much. And so, but the Ole Miss one was pretty impressive. You see Ole Miss turns around, beats Kentucky. So that's a good team. What were some of your impressions on the Ole Miss win and the Oklahoma win? We'll talk about preparing for Florida here in just a few minutes.
Sure. Well, I'll take it back even a game before that in LSU, because I don't think we had a chance to discuss that. But
did we not? Okay.
3 straight games of better flow on offense. That was probably the number one takeaway. I thought Auburn just looked so much more efficient, and we knew that Tennessee obviously was a really good defensive team. But I thought Auburn was kind of out of rhythm with Janai coming back into the rotation. Mm-hmm. And as he's become more comfortable, he's still not full speed. And you notice that. I mean, I think everybody can tell he's still favoring his ankle some. The explosion's not there in the same way that it was before. But they found different ways to do it. And he's been a willing passer and allowed the offense to roll through him without necessarily forcing things. If you're talking Ole Miss specific, I thought it was extremely impressive the way Auburn shot the ball, the way they shared the ball, their willingness, to give the extra pass. And so many different times to go 14 of 28 from 3, to steal a line from Chris Beard. Not many people are going to beat Auburn, and they're certainly not going to beat them when they shoot 50% from 3.
Yeah.
I thought that was Auburn's probably their best road game, like pure road game, not a neutral site, but their best road win to this point and best road performance. And it was encouraging to see, because I do believe that Ole Miss is a quality team. Like you said, while Kentucky has some deficiencies, they're still Kentucky. They've still got a lot of talent on that squad. And so to have a team that's, I would consider a top 25 team in Kentucky, go into Oxford and get just absolutely rolled by 20 points, where Auburn walks away with a 10-plus point victory, says a lot about the quality of this team and the quality of basketball that Auburn's playing right now. I mean, if you were to, I guess, do the Pepsi Challenge and you gave scores and didn't say what teams were playing, to just the average person before this season, you would have probably thought that Kentucky was the team that Auburn has been to this point, and vice versa, right? Like you just Kentucky's the one with all the national accolades, and yet Bruce has this team. And look, they're talented, don't get me wrong, but playing at a level that's kind of unprecedented for Auburn right now. You talked about it, 2 straight months without a loss. Impressive play right now. You've suffered an injury to your most important player, and you've come out of it unscathed for the large part of it. So you're right about Oklahoma. They were overmatched in the post.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize that Auburn had that kind of an advantage and that they were going to shoot the ball the way they were and guard the way they were, that Oklahoma just didn't have much of a chance. Just too small, a little bit. I didn't feel like they probably played their best game, but I think that had largely to do with the way Auburn was guarding them defensively. I just felt like Auburn got after them and made them uncomfortable in a way in that second half that they weren't anticipating. So large part of it is just impressed with the fact that Auburn has continued to hit its stride. It doesn't look like it's leveled off just yet. They increased the offensive flow and have found a way to get back into a rhythm even without their best player playing at his top end. So, and then like you talked about, you got a really good Florida team coming in. So this has just been a run for Auburn that it's hard for me to wrap my mind around at times. I mean, I think when you win a game and you go from 1-1 in the net, and that hasn't changed over like 4 weeks, it just talks about how dominant your program is at this point.
Yeah, they're entering week 5 of being number 1 in both polls. This is the 5th. No, is this right? They've been 4 weeks, and this is 5. Now I've lost track. I can't remember if they've been 4 weeks, and the most recent number 1 going into Oklahoma Florida week was the 5th week, or if this is the 4th week. I've lost track now. Either way, it's a program record.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it was just impressive. Double from Broome and Cardwell in Oxford.
Yes.
Cardwell 2 straight games, by the way. Dylan's one of those guys that depends on the matchup, kind of depends on sort of how things go. Does he get an early foul? Just sort of he's not always going to be a major factor. He's always going to be a factor. He's not always going to be. So sometimes he'll play 15 minutes and, he'll get 3 or 4 rebounds. Like he's not a major factor.
Mm-hmm.
He's always some type of factor, but 2 straight games he's been fantastic. Ole Miss and Oklahoma. He had 8 points against Oklahoma, 10. I don't remember what he ended up with Ole Miss. So you're talking about, about 10 points a game his last 2 games, about 8 rebounds, 7-ish rebounds per game the last 2 games, 6 blocks against Oklahoma.
Yes.
So his last 2 games, he's about 10-8, like 4 blocks, probably 4 assists, per game. He's been great. Of course, Chaney struggled a little bit. Ole Miss comes back, has a super productive game against Oklahoma. Another one of those guys that not every game Chaney's going to be. There's some games where Chaney's sort of not disappeared, but there's some games where he's maybe struggled to make his mark. But Oklahoma was one of those games. They're just this Auburn team is. They're similar to last year. Last year they were analytically phenomenal. Remember last year that Auburn team was top of a lot of analytics.
Yes.
I'd say the difference is Janai being the focal point this year was not that last year. Like Janai got his last year, but he wasn't the man.
Right.
That's different. And then I think you've got, obviously you bring Denver back, but you've got a more consistent offensive player in Tahad. You didn't have that with Trey and Aiden. They could pop off, but they weren't super reliable. Tahad can literally just go off, or he could go on a 10-0 run potentially. You add in Miles, who is, all things being considered, Miles, Janai's really good. Miles, I think, is right there in terms of just the best all-around scorer. Janai obviously can do all of his stuff, but Miles can hit a 3. He can drive. He can pull up and hit a baseline shot. He can go to the rack. So you add Miles into that equation. That's a big deal. So Janai, so there's a little bit, obviously it's a better offensive team than last year, but you better have the balance Auburn does if you're going to beat them. Like Duke can beat them fine. Alabama's capable. Like I think Florida's got the roster to beat Auburn,
Yeah.
but there's not a lot of teams in the country that have got a roster to beat Auburn. Certainly, if we're just talking SEC, there's not a lot. You better have a lot of weapons, and you better have a lot of ways to win. I think that's what impresses me about Auburn so far. If I wrote about it a little bit, but if you think back just the season, they go to Houston and win. JP Pegues is the starting point guard in that game.
Yes.
You go to Maui, JP Pegues is the starting point guard. So Pegues is your one, playing a bunch of minutes. Tahad obviously was big against Houston. And they beat Houston and they win in Maui with Pegues playing major minutes. You win Maui and Jakai's nowhere to be found.
Right.
Jakai can come back and contribute. Like it just sort of hasn't mattered. Janai Broome missed 2 games. Auburn went 2-0 against ranked teams.
Yes.
Miles against Oklahoma was 1 of 7 for 3. Like didn't matter. They scored 98 anyway. I mean, there's some games in there where Denver struggled recently. Not the past 2. He's picked it up the last 2 games. He was perfect against Oklahoma. But there were some Tennessee, LSU, Georgia. There were some games where Denver didn't play his best. Didn't matter. Auburn still found a way to win. And so obviously when it comes to big games like Florida, Bama, what will be big games at Kentucky and at Texas A&M, you want to have everybody firing on all cylinders. You can't have super important players having bad games, but it just shows you that the fact that they're 21-1 and have 14 straight wins. And you could go through there and different guys have been off and different guys have been on. There's different circumstances and they've been grinded out games and they've scored 90 and
yep.
And they're tough to beat. I think that, now, man, you look at this thing. The Florida game is massive. You beat Florida. We'll see what happens. A&M is still hanging around. What is A&M in the league? Are they 2 losses?
Let's see.
I had it. I can't remember if they were at 2 or 3. They are at 6-3. Missouri, of course, loses to Tennessee. They're sitting at 6-3. Auburn beat them.
Yes.
A&M at 6-3 will continue to watch because Auburn still has a big game there in College Station. So you'd like to see A&M get to 4 losses. Tennessee is at 4 losses, which, man, that's an interesting team. Like they're 6-4 in the league, but their 4 losses are Auburn, Florida on the road, Kentucky upset them, and then of course the Vanderbilt kind of last second. They've beaten Florida at home. They just beat Missouri, so they've played a crazy. The last 2 weeks for them has been really, really tough schedule. Point is, if Auburn beats Florida, you're I'd say we're still a few more games away. That'll be game 10. We still have 8 games left. But you beat Florida, and we're creeping up on this very clearly being an Auburn-Alabama battle. Like, and you beat Florida, you're 4 games up on them, and you beat them. You're already 4 games up on Tennessee, you beat them. Missouri, you're 3 games up on them, you beat them. There's no, so we're talking tiebreakers. A&M's the one that you're 3 games up on, you still have to play. So if you were to go there and get upset, that gap is still fairly close. But you beat Florida. You beat Florida this on Saturday, and yeah, you're looking at the rest of the way going Auburn and Alabama battling this out, and that last game of the regular season is just, you start to look at it and go, like in the game in Tuscaloosa next Saturday is going to be monster too, but the one at the end of the year with as good as Auburn and Alabama are probably still winning is going to be, it's going to be the biggest game in the history of the series. The one in Tuscaloosa will be, and then the one in Auburn will be on top of that.
I don't disagree.
That's what that game of Florida, you beat them, and you're pretty close to turning this whole thing into a 2-team race.
2-team race with, and I hate to project out like this, right, or to speculate, but 16-2 is on the table for Auburn as a conference schedule.
Torvik's got them still projected to 16-2, and there's nobody within 3 games. They've got Alabama at 13-5. They've got Florida and Missouri at 12-6, and then they've got A&M and Tennessee at 11-7. 16-2 in this league is historical. Like is just stuff of legends. Like this is the hardest season in the history of the conference. You're talking about 13 teams potentially in the tournament. If you went 16-2, which I still think, we'll just see that would be
right.
You put yourself into an argument of the best team. I'm about to say you put yourself. There's an argument of the
Sure.
best team the SEC's ever seen. Now, some great teams, right? Like Kentucky's had some phenomenal teams. They're not there yet. They're 9-0. They got 9 more league games. Like
Right.
they're way far away from that. But the difficulty of the league is what creates that argument. If you can somehow win this league by like 2 games.
No, I'm with you. And that's what I'm saying. It's so hard to imagine. Like if you'd have told you and I, Auburn's going to go 16-2 in conference play before this season tipped, I would have said, no way. No way is that on the table. And realistically, it is if you get past Florida. But to me, that's the big one, right? Todd Golden has a fantastic team. I believe Bruce called them the toughest team or the most athletic team. Yeah, the most physical team in the SEC. And I don't think he's wrong by saying that. Tennessee might want to argue or quibble over that, but it's a really, really good program and good team that Todd has built. And so Auburn will have the advantage. They're coming into Neville. Janai will have extra 3 days of rest going into this game, so maybe he'll be a little bit more himself. But this is we talked about the Alabama game being the biggest of the series. This Florida game is the biggest game of the season to me to this point.
Oh, yeah.
Even though you went to Cameron Indoor, I get it. It was Duke. But this game is more indicative of what Auburn's future holds, in my opinion. And so to get this one, doesn't matter if it's by 1 point or by 20, you need it. Yep. And it's survive and advance and move on because it's another quad 1 win, another top 10 net opponent, great program, good coach. And you're right about Auburn winning in different ways, and they can beat you at your game. I mean, Tennessee is a rock fight type program. That's how they want to play. Auburn played their game and still won. Ole Miss wants to turn you over. And to a degree, they did turn Auburn over in that game. But Auburn was able to play up tempo with pace to a degree, inside out basketball, and shot the 3 exceptionally well, made the extra pass. And you're beating coaches now. I mean, think about how many potential Hall of Famers there are in this conference. Bruce himself, obviously, but Rick Barnes, John Calipari, say what you want about Arkansas this year. Phenomenal basketball coach. Chris Beard. I mean, I would call him a top 5 to 10 basketball coach in all of college basketball right now. I think he's that good. And Auburn has beaten all of these with the exception of Tennessee by double digits.
Yeah, and the Tennessee game was I wish, I think that's a game where if Broom's fully 100%, maybe that's one where you could have stretched to 8 or 9.
I think so.
I think him sort of slow going. Yeah, it took him a little bit, I think, to get his rhythm in that game. And it was obviously really close. I think the Florida game. Oh, this is a game that I don't know. I think Florida is just one of those teams, despite their 3 losses. What are they? 3? They're 6-3. I mean, right? They went to Knoxville and got beat up on.
Yep.
What were their other ones?
They lost us.
Got them.
Didn't they lose to Kentucky? They lose a stunner to them.
Oh, the high scoring game, right? Like right out of the gate.
Yep.
In Lexington. And then didn't Vanderbilt they beat Kentucky and Tennessee. I don't know who.
Let's see. Missouri. It was the Missouri game, wasn't it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Missouri. I mean, so Missouri's obviously surprisingly good, but I just think Florida's roster is so good. Like, I think Florida's built to go to the Final Four. The fact that they're sitting there with 3 losses is a tad surprising, although, like we said, losing in Knoxville and losing in Rupp is nothing to be ashamed of. And then Missouri, who's having a great year.
Yes.
But I just think like Florida's a roster that worries me. They've got the height,
yes,
combined with the athletic ability to compete with Janai. It will not be easy for him. Janai and Dillon combined, that's a great force, Chaney, but they've got the height and athletic ability on the front line to make it difficult on Janai. They may even be able to just go one-on-one and see how things go. I don't know that they'll sit there and double like Oklahoma did from the get-go. I think they could just say, well, we think we've got a couple guys that are long and athletic, and Houck and Condon, and we'll see what happens. You toss in some real physical guards. Now Walter Clayton is not 100%.
right.
I don't think that's a big deal. But I just think Florida's roster top to bottom, like I think they're built to match up with Auburn pretty well. They're physical, they play pretty good defense, and obviously they can score. I mean, they're kind of like Auburn. They can do it on both ends. I think they're very much more dangerous than Tennessee. When Tennessee came in here, I thought, even though the game was more low scoring than I thought Auburn's offense would win the day. Florida, I think, can do it. Can do both. Can do it on both ends. So it's playing at home's huge. Neville's huge.
Yep.
You've had a chance to rest a little bit, right? You play Tuesday night. You're at home all week. So you have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of staying at home. Florida played it on Tuesday too. There'll be a travel day there. Look back to last year, right? Florida got Auburn in Gainesville. Auburn played terrible. Auburn got them in Nashville. That was without hand-locked. And like Florida was competitive in that game. Auburn just went on a run in the second half to push that thing out of reach. Trey Donaldson was a big part of that. Denver Jones. Everybody kind of had a hand in that little midway through second half run and beat Florida. But Florida was competitive there. I mean, they started out of that. I mean, I was at that game and they came out of the gates second half and closed that gap really quickly. And then Auburn, behind all those fans in Nashville, went on a run. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really, really good game. I mean, I think it's a legit matchup. It's the first team probably since Duke that I think's got the roster and the makeup to match up with Auburn and to create issues. I mean, Iowa State did it. Yeah. Houston had the size and physical ability. And Pearl talked about that. He talked about Houston in Iowa State before the SEC season. Like, those are SEC teams. But so in terms of like roster makeup and matchup, I think they're right there with Houston, Iowa State, and Duke in terms of what can happen. And look, Auburn was down big to Iowa State. Auburn was down to Houston. Auburn was down double digits to all three of those teams.
Yes.
Won two of them, but they were down double digits to Houston, Iowa State, and Duke. So that's just how highly I think of Florida and Todd Golden as a coach. I think it's going to be a monster game just because, like I said, they can do it on both ends. Like, Alabama's really scary because they can score 100 points. They don't play great defense. They can at times, but you're probably going to get yours against them. You just have to get enough stops against them. Florida, I just think, can do it on both ends, and that makes them really scary in my eyes.
No, you're right. And you talked about it, but the athleticism in the post. And that was something that I found more problematic for Janai last year than this year. It feels like Janai has played better against athletic bigs this season. And maybe part of that is that he's being matched up or utilized as a 4 and less as a 5. And I think give Bruce some credit because he did take some criticism from some of the fan base that didn't understand why Auburn didn't pursue a 4 to feature Janai more at the 5 this offseason. And you were on the front end of that, Justin, where you said Janai's going to get some looks at 4, and he's adjusted and played really well. And I think it has helped him in these matchups where you've played bigger post players and he's not matched up against the 5-man there. He can use some of his length and size where he matches up against that 4. So it's not as problematic for him. But Florida's a complete team. Like you talked about, offensively, defensively, they've got Final Four pedigree. They really do. Now, again, you get this game at home, and I think Auburn has, just like I think about Florida, that they have Final Four pedigree. Auburn is absolutely a Final Four type caliber program right now. To me, this game will be won or lost probably by the production you get out of the point guard position. I think how Denver and Todd react to some of the extended ball pressure that Florida's going to feature in this game will probably determine the outcome, in my opinion, because they're going to have to play strong with the basketball. They're going to need to play in a similar fashion to the way they did against Ole Miss. And I think Ole Miss even turned us over a little bit more than I'd be comfortable with against this Florida team, because I think Florida's capable of making you pay at the other end when you do get turned over. So this is a team that you cannot allow to hang around. You got to put them away when you've got your opportunities, but you can do that. You have the kind of talent to do it, but your point guards are going to have to play strong in this game because they're not going to be scared about coming after you. They're going to 100% come at you, try to force you to either to play strong with it, give the basketball up, and or get downhill, and you got to be prepared to do that. Get to the foul line. Ensure that you're not settling for jump shots. And I think that's where Auburn was a couple of weeks back. There was too much settling for jump shots and contested threes, as opposed to taking it into the lane and pushing for some tough twos at the rim. So how Auburn combats that, plays in ball screen action, I think the pick and roll will be big for Auburn in this game, and how, if Florida chooses to double, how quickly does Janai get rid of the ball? Because he's been phenomenal at that all year as far as hitting the open man. But you're right. I think there's going to be a chance that they're going to play him straight up for a while. And can Auburn put him in a situation where they are forced to double? If they do that, you've got them. But again, to get to that point, I think the point guard is going to have to play strong, and Janai is going to have to be more of who Janai is and not the injured version that we've seen. I don't know that the Janai we saw against A&M will be overly effective against this Florida front line.
Well, and I'm sitting here, you look at Evan Maya, who I cite at times on the site, and who we had on the show in the summer. Evan Maya is one of the analytics sites I look at. And if you look at player analytics for the SEC, Florida's best two players are Thomas Howell and Alex Condon, who are the two big men we're talking about, who are, 6'9", 10, the same height as Broom, if not, a little taller, but they're right there and have the athletic. Both those guys are athletic. Both those guys can guard on the perimeter and can shoot a three and can jump. So Florida's best two players in terms of the analytics from Evan Maya are the two people that Broom and Cardwell are going to have to compete with, and who Chaney's going to have to compete with some. And then the other part of it is you look at player ratings in the SEC. Auburn's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Auburn's got 5 guys inside the top 20, 6 inside the top 25. By the way, Janai is the top rated player in the league. Number 2, according to Evan Maya, Dylan Cardwell. Number 4, Chad Baker. Number 5, Tahad. And then you can toss in Chaney at 11 and Denver in 20. So 6 in the top 25. The only other team that's got 5 guys in the top 25 of the individual player ratings is Florida. Not Tennessee, not Alabama, not Kentucky. Florida has got Howell, Condon, Clayton, Will Richard, and Elijah Martin, the big physical guard.
Yeah.
All inside the top 23. So when I'm talking about like the roster of Florida, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that can contribute. Martin is another, really physical guard. Like, that's going to be an interesting challenge for whoever has to face him. And so I think it's just going to be, I think you're right about the guards and the pressure. For sure, right? Denver needs to play well. Tahad will be interesting. He's played well in some big games. He's stepped up in big games. This is definitely a game where they're, going to need a pop from him at some point. Sometimes he'll do it in the first half. It seems like a lot of times it's been in the second half. I'd like to see Chaney show up. This is a game where they've got the kind of athletic ability that could negate Chaney. It just depends. Sort of Chaney's kind of one of those guys, like, get him in the flow, a little bit of transition, maybe offensive rebound, and he'll get going. But it just depends. So I'd love to see him continue and have a productive game. Dylan, like to see him, have a little bit of production there. But yeah, I think it's going to be. I don't know I haven't looked at the analytics. Let's see what we got here for what Torvik's saying about this game. I would guess. I don't even know. It's not up. I'd guess you're looking at Wait, Florida's pretty good defensively. I mean, there'll be a little bit of pace. I'm thinking 82-74 Auburn is what it's going to say. Let's see. Auburn Torvik. Oh my God. I was pretty close, dude. 84-74.
Wow.
84. Man, I know this Auburn team. 84-74 is kind of where they're at in favor of Auburn. And that makes some sense. I mean, not many teams the analytics going to give against that Auburn plays is going to say Auburn is not many teams are going to come into Neville and the analytics are going to say you're still going to go over 70, 74, 75. So I think it speaks to Florida in that regard. And so that's about where I'd put it. I mean, I feel like it could end up being closer just because of how close I think these two teams are, but it's one of the few teams they play that normally I'd say if Auburn gets to 80, Alabama, I mean, they're just not going to be, but Florida's one of those. Florida's one of those that Auburn could get to 80 and it could absolutely be,
yes,
down to the wire. Like Florida could be right there. Could be right there with them. If they can get it, it'd be 13 quad one wins. By the way, they've gone back and forth between 12 and 13 quad one wins this week. They were at 13 when they beat Ole Miss. Then it fell to 12 because Mississippi State dropped out of the top 30.
Yeah.
Then Mississippi State crept back into the top 30, so it went back to 13. Then LSU is just playing terrible right now, lost. Now they've fallen out of the top 75, so it's back to 12. So Mississippi State, North Carolina, and LSU, Auburn fans need to root for those teams. All three of those teams are on the cusp of quad one territory for Auburn. If those three lose games, Auburn could lose 3 quad one wins. If those can hang on and win some, Auburn can hang on to some of those. Obviously, Auburn still has Florida, Bama twice, A&M, Kentucky, Ole Miss again.
Yes.
So like a bunch left, but you obviously want to hang on to as many as you can in terms of that, and that matters for seeding, and that's pretty much why it's going to be one of the factors when they're looking at Auburn and going, one, are they a 1 seed? Potentially, could they be the number 1 overall seed? If they're looking at Auburn going, guys, they played the Ken Pom number 1 ranked schedule, and they have 4 more quad 1 wins than everybody else. Like that gap, having that gap could be big versus maybe just 1 more quad 1 win or 2 more. You're up. You got 4+ more than anybody else, and you played the toughest Ken Pom schedule. And I was looking at Ken Pom, by the way. There's only 4 teams right now that are top 15 offensive rating, defensive rating in Ken Pom. Auburn, Duke, Houston, Florida. So it just, again, the Florida team does it on both ends. There's only 4 teams that are top 15 in both Auburn, Duke, Houston, and Florida. So when I talk about this being that kind of challenge, that's what I think. And I know Florida's been weird, right? Like Florida went to Columbia and they should have lost that game. They were down double digits and needed a furious comeback to win at South Carolina, but Auburn did too, right? Now Broome got hurt in the last 10 minutes. We're kind of like trying to figure it out. That'd be the only other game I point to when you were talking about Broome. Murray Boyles is a really good player.
Yes.
But Murray Boyles was motivated, and let's just call it like it is. Murray Boyles took it to Janai Broome.
He did.
And Broome struggled. And Murray Boyles is an athletic big man that, Broome isn't the most athletic. He's crafty. He's smart with his shot. He gets in the right positions, but he's not the most athletic. Murray Boyles is more athletic. Condon and Howe have the athletic ability to get off the ground and contest shots. And so it's going to be a game where I think Janai's going to have to be patient. Other guys are going to have to play well. Don't force it if you're Janai early. Just do your thing, but don't feel like it's any kind of one-on-one battle or personal. I think he does a pretty good job of that, but don't force it or whatever, and let everybody kind of work. And then you just sort of I think it's going to be a game where he kind of has to get his throughout. I don't think this is a game where it's just dump it to Janai and he'll score. Dump it to Janai and he'll score. I don't think it'll be like that. I think it's going to be a game where he has to sort of get his within the flow of everything else, because I think Florida's capable of disrupting some of that. But yeah, I don't know who the X factor would be for Auburn in this game. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a particular person that I would say that guy's got is good. Is if he plays well, Auburn will win. That's the guy. I'm not sure. I mean, Denver, you mentioned the ball pressure. Certainly Denver, Tejada, a big part of that. I mean, you could look at it defensively. Who's guarding Asia Martin?
Sure.
Auburn's been so good against guards. The health of Walter Clayton's probably a really big deal. How healthy is he? Is he a threat, or is he just kind of out there? So that'll be I think that'll be a big part of it too. But I don't know that there's one thing I would look at in terms of a player and go, this guy is sort of the differentiating factor. Is there for you?
I think for me in this matchup, as Chad Baker-Mazara goes, I think he could be the X factor in this game. If this is one of those that he takes over like a Georgia, where he has that run that he goes on where he hits 2 or 3 threes in a row and really swings momentum. He's that kind of player to me that if he's getting his, it could be a really long night for Florida, because I think he's got a unique matchup in this game. I think the player he's going to be matched up against, he's going to give up some size and girth, right? Length advantage to Chad. But he's struggled at times. It feels like playing a little bit of one-on-one. But against Ole Miss, against A&M, it looked like he was in the flow of it. If he'll let the game come to him and not try to force action, and he can score double digits if he's in that 15 range, I think that could be the X factor for Auburn, because that gives you a level of scoring that maybe you haven't gotten in some of the other games that have been a little bit tighter.
Yeah, I'm sitting here sort of looking at Florida. I mean, we talked about the 3 losses. We're talking about a 6-point loss in Rupp in which they scored 100. We're talking about a 1-point loss at home to Missouri, which was shocking at the time because Florida was 2-1 in the league and only had that 1 loss. And Missouri was not. You weren't still sure. I mean, Missouri had already lost to Auburn. Missouri goes to Gainesville and wins by a point. Mm-hmm. And then the debacle that happened at Tennessee, which was really bad for Florida because they're without Ziegler and one of their other big men. And so for Tennessee to beat them by 20 without Ziegler was shocking to see. I don't know what happened exactly with Florida in that game, but generally defensively, I mean, look at the Florida's only 3 losses. Defensively is where they break down. Yeah. Tennessee, they played horrific. That was by far their worst offensive game. They hit 4 threes. Their field goal percentage was terrible. Yeah. That was an anomaly offensively for Florida. When you look at the rest of the schedule, they don't go to the free throw line a ton on offense, similar to Auburn. Their free throw rate's not very high. Auburn's is not super high either. No. That's about it. I mean, they don't, and they're kind of like Auburn, they don't necessarily force a ton of turnovers percentage-wise. I mean, looking through some of these games, there's a lot of relatively low turnover percentage numbers for Florida, but they're just so long and athletic and they're physical. They're kind of like Auburn. They're going to wall you off, and it's going to be a struggle. Vanderbilt, and what's interesting, look at this last game against Vanderbilt. Florida wins that game by 11. Vanderbilt hit 25 2-point shots. That's a ton. But Florida's just good. You look at them and the statistics offensively and defensively, and there's just literally nothing they do poorly. There's nothing. I mean, free throw percentage, they shoot 70% as a team. That's about 200 nationally. They're not a phenomenal 3-point percentage team, 33.9. That's about 150 in the league. It's not, in the country. It's not not terrible, but it's not exceptional. But there's nothing they do really, really poorly, just like Auburn. Or there's nothing that Auburn does poorly. There's a couple of things they do that are average, but most of what they do is very much above average. Florida's a phenomenal. I mean, here, you talk about Auburn's out-rebounded their opponent 4 straight games. Florida's offensive rebounding percentage is top 5 in the country. So you're talking about another team that you're going to have to get after it on the defensive glass and hold them off. Yes. They're definitely a team that you better not bet. You better, Miles, Kelly, Denver, you better be down there getting defensive rebounds. That's probably a big, a pretty big critical. When you're talking about a team that can score and can stop you, don't give them, just like you wouldn't want to give Auburn second chances. You better be controlling the defensive glass and not letting them get second chances, or you're going to put yourself in a tough spot.
Agreed.
Well, it's going to be a 3:00 Saturday, ESPN2, I believe. I mean, look, students started camping. Literally, the students left the Oklahoma game and then just went and got in line and camped out. Already see Florida fans joking around about it on X, talking about how they're Auburn's camping out because it's Florida. I'm like, guys, it's 2025. Haven't we done this already? Auburn has multiple times a year. Auburn students camp out. They're packed for every game, SEC game. You're not the Super Bowl. You're
Right.
the next big game for Auburn this year. So it's funny that we see that. I think it's other fans just trying to rile themselves up, but
Sure.
who cares? I mean, like Bruce Pearl said, he has commended his team for respecting and every opponent and the approach. So that's all it is. It's a respect for your opponent, and that's what gets you to 21-1. So call it another Super Bowl. I mean, that's fine. That's fine. That's how you win. That's how you win and don't have a letdown if you treat them all like your Super Bowl. But we'll see. I think Bruce is secretly, probably privately wondering, does this group have a letdown in them? When is the letdown come?
Yes.
And it hasn't happened yet. I mean, even Duke, they're only lost. That wasn't a letdown. I mean, Duke could win the national championship. You went to Cameron Indoor and lost by 6. I mean, there's nothing about that that's a letdown. I don't even know if some of their close wins. Georgia's was ranked when you beat them. There's not even a game really where you could go, that was a really kind of a bad performance. Maybe they squeaked it out, but that was like if they'd have gone to LSU and won by 1, and you're like, okay, LSU,
Right.
that's not
Right.
good. They should have beaten LSU by 20. So I think secretly he's wondering if this group's got a letdown, but it's tough to have a letdown when you are coached by Bruce Pearl. I'm just going to tell you, if you had a chance to go to practices and just be around the program, he doesn't let you.
No.
Like, you're going to play hard. You're going to get after it. It's hard to have a letdown, but we'll see. It should be an electric atmosphere Saturday, 3:00, Florida, Auburn, another monster game where Auburn can kind of further solidify themselves atop the SEC standings and try to inch closer to hanging a banner, inch closer to that number 1 overall seed. Dude, we're entering this, and I know we'll run, but like in the next week or so, we'll see how things go. Like, you're entering the territory of starting to talk about, like, does Auburn already have a 1 seed wrapped up? I mean, there's going to be a point here soon where we look at the resume, regardless of if they even win the SEC, and go, look at what they've already done. What would have to happen for them not to get a 1 seed at this point? I mean, we're not far away from looking at that. Even if they were to lose a few games down the stretch, their resume is getting to the point where it's so strong that you're going to go, nobody could catch them, assuming they don't fall off the face of the earth. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, I think 14, 13 wins, if you're still in that area, I think Auburn's number 1 seed because of what they've accomplished to this point, who you've played. I don't know that you can go less than 13 wins in conference, though, and get a number 1 seed. I think that's probably the line. Maybe it's even 14. I don't know, but I think that's probably what would have to happen to you down the stretch.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. You're in such a rarefied air conversation, Justin, that we're talking about not just number 1 seed, but number 1 seed overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, even as talented as what was it, the 98 team? Were they the number 1 seed?
98, 99, yeah.
Yeah, 98, 99. Obviously, Mamadou Njai, Chris Porter, Doc Robinson, extremely talented team. Unfortunately, that season ended in the Sweet 16. But that's the only other number 1 seed in my lifetime that I've seen Auburn have. And so to not just have that one, but the number 1 seed overall, and probably you're rubber stamped into the second weekend without even breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
That's rare territory.
Yeah, the Jabari team just missed. They were a 2 seed. Got to go to Greenville, not Birmingham, Greenville, and of course was upset by
Miami. Yeah,
Miami. But we'll see. Yeah, that number 1 overall seed would be massive. By the way, side note: if Auburn gets the number 1 overall seed, long way to go. But I'm just tossing it out there. It would be a Lexington Atlanta thing. It'd be first weekend Lexington if they get by Atlanta, which would be phenomenal for Auburn fans. But that Lexington, by the way, obviously Auburn fans would travel anyway. But that exact same weekend, Auburn plays at Kentucky in baseball.
Ooh, that would be big.
Just like, you just have another reason for, thousands of Auburn fans would be there for basketball anyway. But it'd be funny. Kentucky baseball, like, why are there 3,000 Auburn fans at this baseball game? Because there's like, well, we're in town for little hoops. Anyway, it's just something to think about if you're an Auburn fan and trying to think about logistics. It's one more reason to make that trip. I'm almost positive that's a baseball weekend in Kentucky. All right, what you think? I mean, you got Auburn winning close, or do you think they pop off with a 15-point win, something, or is this just going to be another Tennessee game?
I think it's going to be a higher scoring than Tennessee. My gut says it's like 82-75-ish. I think that's where I'm at with it. I think it's going to be a little bit higher than maybe Auburn wants, but walk away with a 7 or 8 point victory. That's kind of my read on this situation. And I think Ty Golden will keep it closer at times than Auburn fans would like. He knows this staff really well. He knows this team. He's got a good program himself. And so it'll get tight at times. And then I think Auburn will find a way in the end to push it out.
I mean, I'd probably roll with that. Auburn needs to shoot well, assuming that Auburn doesn't go super cold. You think back to last year, how good Auburn was, and then Kentucky comes in there and Auburn went really cold and lost that game against Kentucky that they shouldn't have, but they just had one of those games they couldn't hit a shot. Hopefully that doesn't happen. And I think Walter Clayton's health, if he is a threat, or is he out there, but he's not, but he's not really able to get by Denver Jones and they can kind of control him, that'll be a big deal too. If he's not a legitimate offensive threat, that'll be, that'll hurt Florida. That'll hurt Florida a lot. But I think go play your game. Don't get crazy with the turnovers. The pace should help Auburn a little bit, obviously. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think it's going to be a really good game, a tight game, a tough matchup. But Auburn's already shown that if they play their game, share the basketball, play good defense and stuff, they're going to be really hard to beat at home. But it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a good one. You're playing a team that's got a roster to be in the Final Four. It's a Final Four game.
Yes.
That's what this is. It's the same as Houston, Iowa State, or Duke to me. Even Tennessee, it's a Final Four game. These two teams could be in the Final Four, and nobody would be shocked. So that's what you're getting ready for on Saturday. All right, let's roll. AuburnLive.com. Go subscribe. Go to the YouTube channel. Turn on notifications. Subscribe to AuburnLive.com. We'll be there. We'll have post-game coverage, all that good stuff. We'll talk to Bruce. You're going to be listening to this on Friday. We're going to talk to Bruce on Friday. And so be on the lookout Friday afternoon for some comments from Bruce Pearl on the Florida game at AuburnLive.com, probably after lunch sometime. And then we'll get ready for a 3 p.m. tip in the jungle. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be nuts down there, just like the Tennessee game. It's going to be wild. So we'll see how it goes. We'll come back next week to talk about that one. And then, of course, Vanderbilt. I'm going to go to the Nashville game. I'm going to be up there for an on-3 thing, and so I'm going to cover that game. So we'll come back next week. We'll talk about those games, but that'll be a tricky one right there, sandwiched between Alabama and Florida, by the way. But I'll be up there for that one as well. All right, let's roll. AuburnLive.com. Appreciate you guys joining us. See you.